Bona smiled faintly. The wedding night was approaching. Inside herself, she felt a slight trepidation and excitement. Or maybe it was fear? After all, her husband, King Sigismund I, was 27 years older than her. And as it happens in royal families, fate had not rewarded the king with sons. His first wife, Barbara Zapolska, died at the age of 20 in 1515 of labor fever, taking with her a newborn daughter. Sigismund was looking for a new wife, young, of childbearing age, and preferably rich. In 1518, Sigismund finally married 24-year-old Italian Bona Sforza. Bona's childhood was difficult. Her father, Gian Galeazzo Sforza, died at the hands of his brother when the little girl was not even a year old, and her mother, Isabella of Aragon, tried in vain to fight for the rights of her son at the Milanese court. Isabella and her children decided to settle in Naples. There she took care of the children's education, paying special attention to her daughter Bona. When she learned that she would become the wife of the Polish king and would have to move to Poland, she fell into great despair. She did not love her fiancé. Bona was sad at the feast of her marriage with Sigismund I. She only smiled demurely, reassuring herself of her newfound Polish crown. The manners instilled over the years by her restrained mother took their toll on her. Bona's strict upbringing did not allow her to step out of the role of a noble lady for a moment. Therefore, no one but herself had any idea how tired and tense she was. It seemed as if her eyelids had suddenly become heavy, as if they were made of stone. Her hands trembled faintly, and if the guests had fallen silent at once, they would have heard the rapid beating of her heart. To become a full-fledged queen, Bona had to go through disgrace. She had one night to get through. Finally, after the feast, it was time for the couple to have some privacy. Although, could one really call it seclusion when the bed was full of guests? At least 20 people walked with Sigismund and Bona into their chambers on the second floor of Wawel Castle. In the center of the room stood a huge marriage bed with soft whipped feather beds. Bona looked around faintly. She thought, will the courtiers really be watching? What do they hope to see there? Survive the first wedding night, and the next morning, the aristocrats would bow to her. With her customary elegance, she gracefully raised her arms upward as the maids placed a snow-white cotton shirt over her. This was the only day that subjects and aristocrats could afford to make dirty jokes about royalty. Bona had no choice but to smile politely. She sat majestically on the edge of her side of the bed. On the opposite side sat a slightly swaying husband, his face turned crimson after the wine. At this moment, Sigismund bore little resemblance to a monarch at all. Around the four-poster bed, servants arranged chairs for the dignitaries, princes, and representatives of the emperor. Sweets and drinks were brought in. It was a common old Polish tradition. Bona scrutinized the royal chambers. She tried to distract herself. The ceiling was covered with golden rosettes. There were marvelous frescoes just below the ceiling, and the walls were covered with thick golden cloth. In addition, the floor was made of stone, as smooth as a sheet of glass and covered with a luxurious red carpet. But as soon as her gaze came across the king, Bona pressed her lips together. There were only minutes to go. How she wanted to chase these aristocrats away, and she wanted to get some privacy and go to bed soon. This man, King Sigismund, seemed like a complete stranger to her. Finally, just before the big event, the guests did get up and leave the chambers. It appeared that even without guests, Bona's wedding night would be a disaster. Sigismund was disappointed. According to legend, he went out immediately and afterward wrote a few lines. The queen has brought us 3 gifts, a painted face, fake money, and a bosom that is too loose. In fact, the words were most likely not written by the king, as they were discovered in a German chronicle many years later and were probably written by a foe of Bona, who in time gained unprecedented power for a woman of the Middle Ages. On the contrary, the morning after the wedding night, the king presented his wife with a morning gift, a monetary gift to his wife. It could be money, jewelry, lands, and castles. Sigismund was perhaps delighted with his young wife. Bona Sforza gave birth to 5 children. While her husband was still alive and bypassing Poland's democratic election of a king, she made her son Sigismund Augustus co-emperor with Sigismund I. She was the richest woman in Europe, from whom even the Habsburgs borrowed. They brought to the Polish kingdom the fashion for everything Italian. Bona was cunning, ambitious, and devious, but she was notorious as a woman of power and a poisoner. Even despite her pretty face in her youth, Bona is portrayed as a mostly unattractive old woman. Another reason for such images was that becoming a widow, it was believed that a woman loses all joy and male support. For this reason, the Queen Mother's face was depicted as suffering and devoid of joy. But in her youth, Bona was described quite differently. Her hair was said to be a beautiful light reddish color, while her eyelashes and eyebrows are completely black. The eyes are more angelic than human, the forehead radiant and serene. The nose is straight, without a hump. The face is ruddy, as if adorned with innate shyness. Her lips are like the reddest coral. Her teeth are even and extremely white. Her neck is straight and round. Her skin is snow white. Her hands are the most beautiful, and you can't see a more beautiful hand. All combined make her beautiful and charming. During Bona Sforza's reign at the Krakow court, Renaissance culture flourished. Some Italian customs were also adopted by the Polish nobility. However, the new Queen of Poland was characterized by stubbornness and power. Everyone had already realized that it was easy for a young wife to influence her elderly husband, the king. Bona endeavored to make Poland a more enlightened country along the lines of France or the Italian courts. Thanks to her influence, Italian architects Francis of Florence and Bartolomeo Brecci were invited to rebuild the courtyard of Wawel Castle in the Renaissance style. The queen strengthened not only her own power at court, but also took care of her heirs. Earlier in Poland, the election of the king was not by inheritance, but by vote. Bona crowned her son Sigismund II while her husband was still alive, thus showing the nobility that from now on, the power is transferred by the right of blood. Until 1548, Sigismund II ruled with his father Sigismund I. With the consent of her husband Sigismund I, Bona personally chose bishops from the nobility who served the crown faithfully. There was a little trickery here, for the queen chose those who were more loyal to Poland than to the directives of Rome. In 1540, Bona completely ousted her husband, who was already over 70 years old. In 1543, Bona's 23-year-old son Sforza married Austrian Archduchess Elizabeth Habsburg. The marriage was consummated despite the protests of Bona, who resisted the growing influence of the Habsburgs at court. The 17-year-old Elizabeth Habsburg was crowned as Queen of Poland, and Bona Sforza was called Queen Mother. The new title only increased Bona's dislike of her meek and modest daughter-in-law. Elizabeth, who grew up in a strict family, dared not cross either her husband or her mother-in-law. The young queen showed great patience because of the royal family's neglect of her. Sigismund I, nominally King of Poland, did not interfere in these matters. The marriage of the newlyweds turned out to be an unhappy one. Sigismund II used to spend society in the company of his favorites, and his wife gave too little time. The fragile health of the young Queen of Poland because of nerves and deteriorated. Elizabeth began to have convulsions and epilepsy. This only frightened Sigismund. Bona Sforza sought ways to dissolve the marriage of her son. Elizabeth Habsburg sympathized only with the Polish nobility, understanding in what vice and with what mother-in-law found herself next to a young woman. In 1545, Elizabeth died in terrible agony. The Polish nobility, seeing the Queen Mother's attitude towards her, started talking about poisoning. Suspicion fell on Bona Sforza. Sigismund II at the time was not in Krakow, so the news of his wife's death, as they say, received with sadness. However, 2 years later, Sigismund II married Barbara Radziwill, whom he met while still married. I'll make a separate video about her. According to legend, the king made a secret passage from the royal castle in Vilnius to the Radziwill residence. Barbara was a widow and came from a noble Lithuanian family. Although the Radziwills were considered a powerful family, the marriage of a noble woman to the king was considered unequal. This union was not approved either by the Sejm or Bona Sforza. Everyone feared that, under the influence of the Radziwills, Lithuania would become completely independent from Poland. The conflict between the king, the Queen Mother, and the Sejm lasted 2 years. Eventually, on May 7, 1570, Barbara Radziwiłł was crowned king. Sigismund II was happy. He not only loved his wife, he idolized her, giving her luxurious gifts. Happiness lasted only 5 months. The beautiful, intelligent, and well-read Barbara died suddenly. Bona was again accused of murdering her daughter-in-law. Tired of palace intrigues, Bona wanted to retire to Bari, in Italy. Sigismund II did not give his mother permission to leave for a long time. Only when she gave up part of her real estate did the king allow her to leave Poland. According to another version, Sigismund simply did not want to be separated from his mother, feeling his inadequacy without her. Bona Sforza took with her a huge fortune, about 1 million ducats, mostly looted from taxes, which was the cause of her death. Bona Sforza lent Spanish King Philip II Habsburg 420,000 ducats. A huge sum of money. The Habsburgs didn't want to repay the debt. Therefore, Bona was probably poisoned by her own doctor Papacoti, who was in the service of the Spanish king. Bona died in 1557 in Italy at the age of 63. Several of the Queen Mother's servants disappeared just as suddenly. Sigismund II had a hard time recovering some of his mother's money. The King of Poland erected a magnificent tomb in her mother's honor.